So hello and welcome to the Developing Mind software webinar on using DDtrac for behavior tracking. Today we're going to talk about setting up behaviors goals, setting up behaviors and triggers, using DDtrac for behavior data entry, doing some behavior data analysis, and then finally I'm going to do a little demonstration to show you how to do some behavior data tracking. To give you a little background on myself, I'm Dawn Gregg, and I'm an Associate Professor of Information Systems at the University of Colorado, Denver. I'm also the parent of a child with autism. My research is focused on how to organize and maintain web-based content so it can be better used to meet special education needs. And my work has been published in a number of different journals. I'm also the co-founder of Developing Mind software. If you want to ask any questions during the webinar, please click the show chat in the upper right hand corner and I'll be able to answer any questions. I'll try to answer the questions as they come up. So behavior goals, really behavior data tracking really begins by creating behavior goals, setting up behaviors and triggers, or as you might all know them alternately, antecedents to the behavior for each student. Behavior goals define behavior patterns that are being changed and the actions that you're being taken to reduce them. Behaviors and triggers can be selected from a list of common behaviors and triggers, so you can set up select behaviors that you want to track for your individual student, and you can also specify behaviors that are unique to your student. So if you have a behavior that that your student wants or needs to have tracked that we don't have already defined in our system, you can create your own custom behavior or trigger for that particular student. To create behavior goals, set behaviors and triggers, you'll want to go to the Goals tab in DDtrac, and under that you get to that after you've selected a student. When you get to the Goals tab, you can create a new goal in 4 different ways. So you can use the Behavior Goal Wizard. You can use Goal Edit View, which really takes you to a screen that allows you to just add the behavior goal information in text boxes from scratch. You can do the Behavior and Trigger Edit View, which allows you to set up the behaviors and triggers for your specific student, or you can import behavior goals from a set of sample goals. So we have a database containing many sample behavior goals that you can then import into your student's record, and then you can edit them to meet the individual needs of your particular student. So a behavior goal has a number of different things you can define for it. You have the behavior goal name. In this case, the goal I'm showing you is impulse control. It has whether or not it's active, which means whether or not it's currently a goal you're working on. Then you have the behavior goal description itself. So it describes, what your overall goal is. The description should be written in measurable terms so that you can know whether or not you've achieved this goal. You have the date that you introduced the goal. This one doesn't have a date, so it's active, but we haven't worked on it yet, so the introduced date would be somewhere around today. And then the action plan would be the actions that you plan on taking in order to help the student meet that behavior goal. It could be in interventions, it could be ways of coping so the behaviors do not occur, or things to do after the behavior becomes evident. You can also take notes around the behavior to say, how you might want to implement the behavior plan, how the student is currently doing on the behavior goal. These notes would be something that someone else using DDtrac could see when they're working with the student and maybe adopt for their own practice working with the student. You can also upload files related to the behavior goals. So for example, I know that my son had at one time a behavior action plan that was quite long. It was 3 or 4 pages long, and in that case you might want to have that written in a Word document, and then you could just attach that action plan to the behavior goal for the student instead of typing the whole action plan in the action plan field. So that enables you to share things related to the behavior goal with other members of the education team. When you're setting behaviors and triggers, we have a list of behaviors and triggers that we have predefined in DDtrac. These are behaviors and triggers that are commonly found in children with special needs. So these are common behavior problems, common triggers, but you're not limited to the behaviors and triggers that we have predefined in DDtrac. At the bottom you can see we have these blank text fields. You can actually go in and type in these text fields any new behavior or any new trigger that you want to track for your student, and you can specify that behavior and trigger, and then it will show up on the behavior and trigger data collection pages for that student. One thing I want to note about behavior goals is that behavior data collection is not tied directly to behavior goals. For most of our data collection in DDtrac, the data collection is tied to specific goals, objectives, and targets. But for behavior goals, the goals are really what you're trying to achieve, but what you're taking data on are the behaviors and triggers you define for the student. So you define a behavior, you count the number of times you see the behavior occurring, the amount of time that the student spends exhibiting that behavior, and your goals should be written in terms of how you're going to minimize that particular behavior or reduce the impact of that trigger and that kind of thing. So behavior goals themselves are exclusively used to communicate how best to handle behaviors to other practitioners working with the student, so that all people that are working with the student knows how best to respond to their problem behaviors. So that's really different. It's really a communication tool. So you can actually just define the behaviors and triggers for individual students, and still DDtrac will work exactly the same way. You don't actually have to include the behavior goals in DDtrac. You only include the behavior goals in DDtrac to share them with other people working with the student. Once you've created your behavior goals in DDtrac, you can do behavior data entry, and the behavior data entry is designed to measure target behaviors using primarily direct observation of behavior episodes. So for instance, a type of data that you would collect about a typical behavior episode might include the behavior or behaviors the student exhibited, the duration, so how long did it last, the number of behaviors, he hit me 3 times, he hit himself 3 times, he kicked twice, date and time, so when did the behavior occur, the trigger, which is the specific context or antecedent that likely results in the occurrence of the inappropriate behavior. And then the location is the location where the behavior began. So again, we include date and time, triggers, and location because these are other factors that we might be able to learn something about how the student is behaving. Students may exhibit behaviors at certain times of day, they may have certain things that set them off, or they may have behavior problems in certain locations but not in others. For example, I know that my son often would have behavior episodes in loud, noisy places. So the cafeteria and the gym could be problem places for him. And understanding that the student always has behavior problems in specific locations is an important part of understanding the behavior patterns. So this data really will allow you to understand the function of the specific behaviors, the pattern of the behavior, and then the effectiveness of the various educational strategies and interventions you're using to control the behavior. So when you're taking data, you would go to the Data Entry tab in DDtrac and you click the Behavior Data link, and it will show you a screen that allows you to enter this data that I just mentioned to you about the behavior episode. The form will automatically fill in with a start date and start time for the behavior, but you can change that start date and time to another start date and time if you're recording a behavior that occurred either earlier today or maybe even a behavior that occurred yesterday or the day before. You can then choose the trigger from the drop-down list, and the triggers that show up in the drop-down list will be the same triggers that you entered for that particular student. You can then select the location, and I should mention that the locations where behaviors occur are site-specific. So a specific school will have a list of sites where behaviors can occur. So you can define for your school that behaviors might occur in the classroom, on the playground, in the library, at the parking lot for waiting for the bus. And another school might have a gym or a locker room or a computer lab, and you can create those your own custom locations specific to your school where students might exhibit behavior problems. You can also then enter one or more behaviors for the behavior episode. It doesn't show in this particular screenshot, but you can actually, it starts with by default having one behavior show on the form, and then you can say, I want to add 1, 2, or 3 more behaviors to this form so that I could then document all the behaviors that occurred during this behavior episode. Each behavior records not only the behavior, kicking, but then also the duration, 1, 2, 3, 5, 15 minutes, the number of behaviors for each behavior that they demonstrate. We also have some additional data that's filled in on the bottom part of the form. And this additional data includes intervention. Not always do you have to intervene with the student, but if you do, you can add intervention data like that you had to restrain the student, or that you had to redirect the student to replacement behavior, or that you had to do something else to change the behavior patterns. The duration then also of the intervention. You can include others involved if the student hit someone else, whether they hit a peer or staff. Any consequences that the student received as a result of the behavior. Example as a loss of privilege or some sort of repair or restitution. You should always record areas where there's an injury to a child. So if if the child had a behavior problem and they got a bruise on their arm, or they're cut above their eye because they banged their head, you need to record that. Or even if there was some sort of injury, a result of the restraint that you had to use to keep the child from hurting themselves further. If you're just to go back to the previous screen, so you see the body figure on the DDtrac data collection form. You can just check off the different parts of the body where the injury might have occurred. If it's a specific like left eye, nose, mouth that doesn't show up on this, you check it off for part of the face injured. And then this allows you to select all the places that the student might have received an injury very precisely. Then you can also enter a variety of comments. So comments about how the behavior incident started, if it escalated, what happened to cause it to escalate. Describe alternatives that you feel might have worked in this situation if you'd handled it differently, and then how the behavior episode had ended. At the very bottom of the form there's a quiet room log. It doesn't show up by default. There's a link on the bottom of the behavior data collection form that allows you to show a quiet room log. Most of our sites don't use a quiet room, but some of them do. And if you do use a quiet room, I know in the state of Colorado you're required to document that somebody is observing the student while they're in the quiet room the entire time they're in the quiet room. So the quiet room log allows you to say, 105, student was crying in quiet room. 108, student was hitting their leg in the quiet room. So a log that shows that you are monitoring and watching the student the entire time that they are in the quiet room. So oops, I'm sorry about that. Just wanted to check to make sure my audio was on, because someone reported that the audio had gone off, but looks like everybody else says that the audio is on. So I'll continue on. Once you've taken data, there's a variety of behavior reports that you can generate to deal with to document and then help you understand the way the behavior patterns are changing for this particular student. So there are really 4 different reports that show you behavior details, and I'm going to describe the reports here, and then I'm going to show you an example of each of the reports in a second. So the summary report actually is not specific to behaviors. It summarizes the student's instructional, social, and behavior data all on one big report. You can summarize it by day, week, or month. Typically, I have used it by month to show the student's data over a wide period of time. The behavior detail report shows details on each behavior episode that occurred during the period examined. And I'll show you that. The functional behavior report is designed to provide detailed data on all events surrounding the occurrence of a specific behavior. So let's say I want to look at hitting or headbutting. I can look at everything that all of the triggers that triggered all of the headbutting incidents, all of the locations where headbutting occurred. And this is really designed as part of your functional behavior analysis to help you understand the function of a specific behavior, especially the more severe behaviors for the student, in an effort to better be able to predict, what triggers it and how you can combat it and get it to be reduced. The final report is actually really the first report. It's the incident report, and that documents really a single behavior incident recorded in DDtrac. So once you take the data on the behavior data collection form and you click submit, you're actually taken to the incident report, which is a printable report that you can either print out and send to parents, or you can actually email it to parents or administrators as needed. Behavior reports allow you generally to select the dates the report should cover. So I'll show you. So this particular summary report covers the date 3/1/2008 through 2/28/2009, and you can see I can see all of some instructional data at the top, the number of times the instructional data was taken, its scale, and the percent correct over time. And at the very bottom of the report, which actually the report can be many pages. I think one of these reports for my son can run up to 20 pages long because he has so many goals, objectives, and targets that just documenting them all takes a lot of paper. At the very bottom, then you have the behavior summary, which shows you all of the behaviors that you're tracking for the student, the total number of times you saw those behaviors during the period examined, and then on the right you can see the number of minutes for each of those behaviors in the period, each of the months of the period examined. So for example, overall this student had 8 minutes of behavior episodes in March, 7 in April, 40 in May, 15 in June, and then it tapered off as time went on. So this is a good example of hopefully a behavior report that you would see, where you can see whatever it is you're doing seems to be reducing the overall duration of behaviors for this student. The second report is the behavior report, and it shows essentially all of the information that you entered on that behavior data collection form summarized in a tabular format. So you get the date and time of the behavior, the staff that took the behavior data, the behavior that you actually saw, whether it's one for the first few incidents here, and then multiple types or kicking is down below. So you can get multiple behaviors, the duration of each one of the behaviors in this particular incident, and the count, any triggers that you were able to recognize, the location where the behavior occurred, any interventions that were taken. So in this case we had open quiet room that's been used several times, the duration of the intervention, so how long the student was in the quiet room, others involved, and any consequences. It also shows any notes that were taken during the behavior episode, either the comments about how the episode started or how it ended, or any alternatives that the staff proposed. You can sort this report by date, which is the way it comes up by default, or you can sort it by behavior, so you can get all of the different behavior information sorted, so you can see group it by behavior instead of by date if you want to look at more in depth at specific behaviors. Another option, if you want to look more in depth at specific behaviors, is the functional behavior report. And this particular report is showing the behavior report for hitting, and it shows the period examined, the total number of times each one of the triggers were seen that when we had hitting. So we're looking at hitting 3 times it was triggered by frustration, 2 times by auditory stimulus, etc. Most of our hitting occurrences occur either in the classroom or the therapy room, which suggests to me that they might be surrounding a work episode. And it may be that when you're asking this particular student to do some types of work, that they may trigger a behavior episode, or more specifically a hitting behavior episode. Usually they didn't do an intervention, but 2 times they redirected the student to an alternative behavior. Again, 8 times they didn't do a consequence, but 1 time they did give a loss of privilege, and 1 time they required the student to do repair or restitution. It shows the others involved. 1 time we have a peer, 1 time we have a staff, and the other times we didn't specify. We also look at the overall severity of the episodes. These episodes actually do not appear to be that severe. The average duration of the hitting episodes was 1 minute. The average number of behaviors was 1 per episode. And the total number of injuries, we had 1 time where we reported an injury surrounding a hitting behavior episode. You also, at the very bottom of the functional behavior report, get all of the comments that were entered during the behavior episode. So any comments about how they ended, any comments about alternatives, any other comments surrounding any of the behavior episodes. In this case, they only entered comments about the episode, it looks like 1 time. But if this was for a long period of time, or a real student as opposed to a fictional student, you might see lots of different comments that were entered during the behavior episodes, which would then help you understand the function of this particular behavior in context for this particular student. The last behavior report really is the incident report, which is again generated automatically as soon as you submit a new behavior. You'd be taken to a form that looks something like this, that gives you your student name, who submitted the report, the date, the time. In this case, we can see these little red circles on the figure in the report. That shows that this student was injured during the behavior episode, either as a result of the restraint that was used, because they did say that they use a physical escort restraint during this episode, or it could have been a result of the student trying to hit, bite, or headbutt. So, or I guess they kicked, so it didn't involve their arms. So I would suspect this was from the restraint. And then if it was, you would really want to include what caused the injury to the child in the comments that you enter on the behavior data collection form, because especially if there's an injury, you really need to understand what caused the injury and how you can avoid having similar injuries as a result of the behavior episode in the future. So that really is one of the important functions of the comments when you take comments on a behavior data collection form. This report could be printed. This would be what the report would look like if you printed it out. You can also email the report. There's an email report link on every report page in DDtrac and every chart page, and you can email the report to anybody else that has login permission for this student in DDtrac, because essentially then if they log in, then they'll be taken directly to the report and be able to see exactly what you're trying to show them. And I jumped over. No, I didn't. So in addition to the behavior reports, there's a number of behavior charts that you can create in DDtrac. The behavior charts, there are several different kinds. There's a behavior, just shows the behaviors over time. There's a trigger chart, which shows the triggers or antecedents leading to the behavior over time. There's a location, which shows the locations where the behaviors began, again plotted over time. The interventions, which shows the types or duration of interventions taken in response to behaviors over time. So all the first 4 charts are all time-based, where the timeline could either show the behaviors grouped by month, week, or day. So depending on how often you're plotting the chart, you would choose the number of periods and what kind of period, a monthly, weekly, or daily period for your chart. The behavior time chart shows the times of days that behavior occurs. So it's essentially going to show you, in the 1 or 2 or 3 months shown by the chart, how many behaviors occurred at 8 a.m., how many at 9 a.m., how many at 10 a.m. You can also plot the behaviors by trigger. So you would see all of the behaviors and the duration of behaviors, or the number of behaviors, and then on the bottom you'd see the triggers that cause those different behaviors. You can plot the behaviors by trigger, location, user, or student. The behaviors by student chart is a handy way of actually getting seeing all of the behaviors for a class on one chart. So you can get a big broad overview for all of your students on a single chart. So if you're teaching a class and they all have behavior problems, that could be a quick way to touch base on for all of your students. When you're going to create a behavior chart, most of the behavior chart creation forms look something like this. So it'll either say behavior chart or trigger chart or location chart. You can choose which behaviors, triggers, and locations appear on the chart. By default, it's going to show all behaviors, all triggers, and all locations on the chart. You can choose a start date when you want the chart to start, the number of periods, and what kind of period it is. So in this case, I'm looking at 24 periods monthly, which means my data will generally be grouped monthly over 24 periods. You can look at either the number of behaviors, the number of behavior episodes, or the duration of behaviors. So how many minutes did the student exhibit the different behaviors? The default format for behavior charts is a stacked column chart, and I'll show you in a second. I really like the stacked column chart for showing behaviors because it shows you the total overall number of behaviors or number of minutes the student is exhibiting a behavior, in addition to being able to show you then all of the different behaviors that contribute to that overall total. You can also show milestones on the chart. In this case, I'm going to show you can check off that I want to show the revised behavior plan on my chart. So I want to see if my revision to the behavior plan had any impact on my students' ability to manage their behaviors, and did it actually reduce the number of behaviors I saw. So this is an example of what a chart would look like. In this case, I actually wound up I showed more than just one milestone. I showed revised behavior plan here, I showed behavior plan here, and I showed speech therapy here. So you can see then that overall the student's number of behaviors is decreasing over time. I started in this particular chart in June, and it goes through a year later, November, so a little bit more than a year. The legend shows me what each color represents on the chart. So gray, which is multiple types, is one of my bigger behaviors. Green, which is pinching, is another common behavior. Red shows up quite frequently, and that's hitting. So I can see the contribution of each of the behaviors, the overall total number of minutes that I see each behavior. So I can see I started at 109 minutes. I decreased quickly after I implemented a behavior plan, and then my number of behaviors and my duration of behaviors reduced again after I revised the behavior plan. Speech therapy really doesn't seem to have any impact on my behaviors, which is not surprising. I wouldn't expect speech therapy to have an impact on behaviors. I probably would want to show the speech therapy milestone on my charts related to articulation and other expressive and receptive language goals. So this is an example of a behavior over time chart. Another kind of chart you can create is a behavior by trigger chart. So this is not a time-based chart. I'm seeing these are the behaviors. So hitting on this particular chart is very prominent in the one-year periods studied covered by this chart. And I can see that the most common trigger that I had was frustration. The next most common trigger I had was avoidance escape. The next most prominent one was auditory stimulus. So you can see, oops, I went back. It can help you understand why particular behaviors are occurring and enable you to do interventions that will help you combat those particular behaviors. So I'd like to go now and do a little demonstration in DDtrac just to show you now where all these different pieces fit together. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my DDtrac login. And Rotina is asking me at this moment, and I'll do that as soon as I get in, how I can make those milestones show up on my behavior charts. So I'm going to go, I'll make sure that I include that in my demonstration. I'm not going to remember. Oops, I didn't do that. Okay, let's try again. There you go. So this is my main page when I get into DDtrac, and this is my students I work with, any groups that I might work with. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select Daniel Do. I'm going to select Daniel Do because I happen to know that I have the ability to add and edit goals for Daniel do, and I can tell that because I can see here view instructional goals, but I can also edit instructional goals. I can edit behavior goals. If you come to a student and you only see one menu here and it only says you're allowed to view instructional goals, view social goals, or view behavior goals, you only have data entry or read permission for the student, and you will not be able to add or edit those students' goals. So we have 3 different permissions levels for students, and so you have to have edit permission for a student to be able to go in and edit their behavior goals, behaviors, and triggers tracked. So if I were to go in here, you can see that this particular student has impulse control behavior. We have behaviors, and these are the behaviors and triggers that are defined for this particular student. If I go into data entry to take my initial behavior data, there's several different kinds of behavior data entry you can do. One of them is behavior data, which takes you to the form that's similar to the one that I showed you. Well, actually it's the same form, but you can see the whole form where you can enter the start date, the start time, the trigger, and this is the list of triggers for the student, the location, the behaviors that are being tracked for this particular student. You can add additional behaviors, so I could add 2 additional behaviors to the form, which would allow me to take data for 3 particular behaviors. The duration, oops, let's give it 1 minute for each one. I'll just do 1 for each one of these behaviors. I could submit my behavior here, or I could go in and add additional data about the intervention, like perform a calming exercise for 2 minutes. And then if there was, I said that we had headbutting, well, let's say we hurt our head when we headbutted. If I say there's an injury, I really do want to go in and type in Dan hurt his head when head-butting staff. So then I probably would want to say others involved would be staff. Okay. Once you've completely filled out the form, if the student went to a quiet room, you could show the quiet room log by clicking the link at the bottom of the page, and this is just an example of what the quiet room log looks like. If you don't use quiet room logs, then you just leave that hidden, and you would never see that on your form when you printed it out. So then you can submit the behavior, and this takes you right into the incident report. You can see the red circle on the body where we had recorded that there was an injury to a child. You can see all the data and about the who did enter the behavior data, when, where the behavior occurred, what the behaviors were, what the interventions were, what the comments were. You can delete a behavior record. It'll show up on the bottom of the incident report. It's a 2-step process because we don't want you to accidentally delete data, but sometimes you'll enter data and you'll double click or something and you get data entered twice, or accidentally enter data for the wrong date. So if you do that, you can always go in, click delete, and then click yes and hit submit, and then that will permanently delete that behavior record that you just entered. This takes you back to the reports tab. Under the reports tab, you can create the different reports and charts for report data. I'm actually under the incident report section, so this shows you all of the different incidents, which are the more severe behavior episodes. These are our more minor behavior data where we didn't take any of the additional behavior data on the bottom half of the report. So you can actually go in and look at any of the past data, and if you need to, you can delete something that you may have entered erroneously. Now, as Rotina asked, I want to show you how to enter milestone data. The way you would enter milestone data is you could go to the data entry tab, and you see the choice notes and milestones. One of the choices is milestone or change. This is relatively simple to do, so let's just say change behavior plan. Oh, it's got to be a short name because this is going to be on the I ran out of room, so let's go behavior plan rev. You want to keep the name short because if it's too long, it'll run off the chart, which is why we restrict the number of characters for the milestone name. But you can go in and you can say, you know, revised the behavior plan to include ... So you could say whatever you wanted here, give a lot of detail on how you revised the behavior plan. So this would be a permanent part of the student's record. And then once I post this milestone, then you can see the behavior plan revision is right there. We have another milestone, reduced medication, that we did just a few days ago. So this is an example. Then you can put those milestones on a report. And so if I or a chart, actually they show up on the charts. So if I were going to do behavior charts, we have several choices on behavior charts. One of the ones that is relatively new is the ability to create multiple behavior charts, which really shows you the behaviors over time, the triggers over time, the locations over time, and the interventions over time. So I could go in and do multiple behavior charts and say, okay, I want the behavior charts to be from this is for the last year. Let's make it for the last 2 years. So let's go 4/1/2008 for 24 months. And I'll do the number of behaviors instead of the duration. And again, I like the stack column chart, but you have other choices. You can do a column chart, a pie chart, a line chart, or a line chart with data labels. But I'm going to leave it as a stack column chart because I just think the stack column chart works the best for showing behavior data. For some reason, I'm not seeing milestones on this. Oh, I think I don't see milestones because I'm showing all of the different kinds of charts on one. Let's see. So in this case, I didn't get the milestones, but you can see this is my behavior chart. These are my behavior by trigger. These are my triggers over time. These are the behavior, oh, wait, where do I go? Behavior trigger. Then behavior locations, and the last one is behavior times. So you can see that this student is actually in a group home, so we have behavior times starting as early as 9 a.m. and going as late as 11 o'clock at night. So you get them all across the day, 24-hour day. If you was just seeing this student in class, then you would the data times would be restricted probably from 9 a.m. to 2 or 3 p.m. depending on how late the student stays at school. Yet you don't get the option of putting the milestones on the multiple charts. If I want to show you the milestones, I would just go to the regular behaviors chart and I could say include only selected milestones. Ooh, let's go 2008. Well, let's go 2009, and we'll do 24 months again. Now we get the 2 new milestones that we just added. And if we were to generate the chart, then you would see those milestones. They're plotting on top of each other because we did them. I entered them both like 2 days apart. So if you wanted to see them better, I would probably just plot one of them on the chart at a time. So you can see that we did have the milestone showing up here, and we have obviously no data after this date because this is like today, and we don't have any data going forward in time. Oh. Okay, and Michelle wants to know how you can establish a goal, the behaviors and triggers. So let's go over here to behaviors and triggers. And so here's the behaviors and triggers currently being tracked for this student. And you can go in and you can, oops, behavior goals, active. Did I go edit behavior trigger? So this takes me to the edit window. If you wanted to add a special condition, so this student actually has one called multiple types, which allows you to take data on multiple different behaviors at once. We primarily, that one was used for when the student actually did all sorts of different behaviors at one time. So it was hitting, kicking, biting, pinching. But let's say you didn't really want to track hitting, kicking, pinching separately. You could actually create a behavior either like just call aggression, which would just allow you to track aggression, A-G-G, aggression. I can't spell. So can I spell check page? Yes, it says so I'm using our spell check built in, and it says aggression. I typed that wrong, so I'll replace it. Okay. Um, it doesn't do case well, so I'll change the case back to aggression. Or you could do something like vocalization to be so you could get all your vocalization behaviors, or you could, instead of doing aggression, you could go hitting, kicking, biting, and screaming, crying, and update your behaviors and triggers tracked. And then you would see the hitting, kicking, and biting would show up as something that you could take. The screaming, crying would be showing up as something you could take data on. And so the next time you went to take data for this student, you could actually go in, instead of doing hitting, kicking, and biting separately, I could just choose hitting, kicking, and biting as a combined behavior. So in that case, I wouldn't know whether or not they hit, they kicked, or they bite, but I would know that they had done some sort of aggressive behavior during the behavior episode. So it pretty much covers all you really need to know about taking data in DDtrac and setting up reports and charts to show you how those different behaviors were exhibited. So does anybody else have any questions for me at this time? I'm going to go to my thank you slide. So if you do have any more questions for me, well, two ways you can get more information. You can actually go to our online user guide at www.ddtrac.com/demo/wiki.asp. There's also a link to it in everybody's on the homepage of DDtrac. So if I go back to the homepage, you can see that there's a link to the user guide, which would allow you to look up any of the information that, for additional details on any of the information I've provided today. You can also email us at ddtrac@developingmindsoftware.com, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have on behavior data entry with DDtrac.